I want to share with you a story about a man named Harold. And that is his real name. Harold was a homeless man that went to the same church that my family went to. Harold was mute. He couldn't speak. He could sort of make little grunting noises, but he could not speak. He could hear. He could see, but he couldn't speak. Nobody really knew Harold's story. He just started coming to church years before I even got there, and he just showed up, and there he was, and he'd come down that center aisle, and he'd go right up front and sit on the front pew, and he'd sit there all the way through church, and then when church was over, he'd get up and go down that center aisle and go back to where he was staying. Well, the people in the church, they tried to talk to him. Of course, he couldn't talk, and he didn't do sign language or anything. I don't even know how much he understood of what they were saying to him. But some of the men in the church decided to follow him one day. Harold had an old bicycle that he rode around on. So they followed Harold home. Harold's home was literally a cardboard box under a bridge or an overpass on the freeway there. And that's where Harold lived. And he had, gathered little things and had made himself a home there. All year long, whether there was snow on the ground or the sun was beaten down or whatever, that's where Harold lived. So they tried to get some things for Harold, and they rented an apartment and tried to move Harold in the apartment. But Harold would not stay in the apartment. He would leave and go back to sleep under this bridge. Harold seemed to want to live under the bridge for whatever reason. That was Harold's home, and nobody was going to change it. And so it was very frustrating because they really wanted to help him. And every so often, sometimes he'd show up to church with no shoes on his feet because he didn't have shoes anymore. Maybe somebody stole them, or they just didn't fit anymore, or he lost them or whatever. And so then they would, somebody would take their shoes off, to find a pair that would, whoever had the pair that would fit Harold's feet, they gave him their shoes, and, and the guys would get him clothes ever so often. And, because he was always in the same clothes. I don't think he ever took them off until they would start falling off of him. He was really pretty bad. I mean, so he'd come in unbathed, unshaven, unkept. He was an older man. He was probably in his 60s at that time. I was young back then. I wasn't in my 60s. Yeah, young Angie did exist. So anyway, Harold was at church every Sunday. If Harold didn't show up at church, believe me, there were people that went to the bridge to make sure he was okay. And sometimes it was because he was sick, and there were a couple of times they took him to the hospital. And, I don't know, there was a lot of things that people tried to do for Harold, but Harold didn't want it. Well, on this one particular Sunday, we had a wonderful pastor. I loved our pastor so much. He really loved the Lord, and he would listen to God. And if God wanted to do something that was not part of the schedule, that was fine with this pastor. We're going to do what God wants. Well, this one particular Sunday, everybody was all kind of, hyped up. It was kind of a holy rolling church. They'd roll in the aisles or whatever, jump the pews. We had a great organist that could really get rocking. And if my kids are watching this video, remind them that they did this song "Jump," and and it was about jump, 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 for the Lord or whatever. And you would know every Sunday they had to do this thing, and it'd go on for 20 minutes or more. And the organist, man, when how we'd come on him, and he'd start going crazy on that organ, and then everybody'd start going nuts, and they're in the aisles and dancing around, and oh my goodness, it was something else. And my kids used to just think that was just the greatest thing. And so anyway, this particular Sunday, everybody was all wound up. And it was loud in there and noisy. And our pastor got up, and he's like, I need everybody to be quiet. I need everybody to be quiet. And he finally, the church mothers saw, and they're like, oh, okay, so they get everybody quiet. And so, yeah, it was a black church. If you don't know what a church mother is, you've not been in a black church. They rule. And we had two church mothers, and our family was the token white family in the church, so they could say they were multiracial. I don't know. It was back when we had the radio station, and it was a black gospel format, and Pastor Mike, the associate pastor, had come to get to know us and invited us to the church, and we just so that's where we ended up going, and it was fun. So anyway, so the pastor finally got everybody to kind of settle down and get quiet. And he goes, look, the Lord's telling me that he's going to do a miracle this morning. He's going to speak to us, but it's going to be a miracle. And I need everybody to be quiet, because he said, you've got to be quiet or you're going to miss it. So finally, they got everybody back in their seats and quiet. Very, very quiet. And so the pastor, he goes, we're just going to wait on the Lord now to do what he's going to do. And so pretty soon, Harold stood up. And Harold began to speak the most eloquent, perfect English I've ever heard. Everything was pronunciated perfectly. Or is it enunciated? I don't know. But Harold, that day, he had it. He had that thing down. And he got up and he just began to speak out this word from the Lord that was so beautiful, so beautiful. And I'm just like going, oh my word, it is a miracle. The mute is who God's speaking through. That's impossible. And when Harold got done, and he had a brightness in his eye, and his hands, it was almost like he was doing a dance. And Harold was a white guy too. I should have pointed that. If we're going to point out the difference, Harold was the token white homeless guy. So Harold delivered this word, and like he was somebody else. You knew the power of God had come on this man. And then when he was done, he sat down and became Harold again. I was crying. I was like, oh my word, that was God. Pastor was right. We'd just be quiet. We were gonna hear him deliver a word to us in a miraculous way, and he did. And I'm just thinking, this is amazing. And then I hear somebody's voice. That was Harold. That ain't God. We need God to move on somebody else. And I was like, what? And then somebody else said, yeah, that wasn't God. God wouldn't speak through Harold. I'm like thinking, where are you guys? Did you just miss this? Were you sitting here seriously and you missed it? Oh my word. So kind of a little stir. And the majority of the church was stirred up that wasn't God, because it was Harold. Well, I'm telling you, I know it was God, because it was Harold. Sometimes we are asleep and we're stuck in our own little comfortable world and our own ideas, and we've tried to put God in this box. And if anything tries to happen outside that box, we'll say that wasn't God. But I knew it was. And that was the miracle of Harold. And that was the day I saw my pastor go, shake his head like, Lord, how are you ever going to get through to these people? And that was that. You guys, God does not always move, manifest, or minister the way our traditional thinking expects. I'm leaving you with that one today. If you got God in a box, I suggest you let him out, because if you don't let him out, he's going to come busting out anyway. You cannot put God in a box and keep him there. But if you try to, you'll miss the miracle. All right. I love you guys. If you haven't subscribed and you enjoy the videos, please subscribe. If you know somebody that this might bless, share the video with them. And make sure you hit the notification bell so that each day they'll let you know when my new video comes up, because I put a new one up every day. All right. I love you guys. You have an awesome day, and I will talk to you later. If it'll...